Greetings everybody, this is Dr. David Kuhn. I'm making this video today because there's a significant amount of misinformation, bad information, false information, skewed information about COVID, about the flu, about how bad COVID really is, how bad COVID is compared to the flu, rumors floating around, skewed numbers, media numbers, the CDC numbers, what other doctors are posting, other videos, all over the place. There's so many rumors flying, and we're gonna straighten this out with nothing but the facts. So I'm gonna explain it in detail to you right now. So let's go straight to it. First, we're gonna start with, this is Friday, May 1st. We are currently at about 64,500 COVID deaths documented in the United States. One comment about the number of deaths. There's a number of people that think that there is a significantly higher number of deaths, or this number is underreported because of many people that have died in the last 8 to 12 weeks with COVID-like symptoms, but were never actually tested or swabbed. Then there's also a lot of people that think that this number is artificially inflated, that deaths are being assigned as COVID deaths even though they were never really tested for COVID. Probably those numbers roughly equal out. It's really impossible to say, but we're gonna have to go with what the CDC is saying the current number of deaths is, and so that's what we're gonna go with. So I'm gonna give you a once-over on this board here. So we're gonna be talking about COVID versus flu, and we're gonna be breaking down all the details of each. And then we're going to be looking at this big question mark here. What is the death rate for COVID? We don't know, but we have our first glimpse into what that might actually be, and I'm going to give you the calculation on that here in just a minute. But first, let's run through the difference between flu and COVID, just as an overall breakdown. So first, death rate. So I'm using numbers from the CDC, straight off the website. Anybody can see it. We have a breakdown of the 2015-2016 flu season, 2016-2017, 2017-2018. I'll remind everybody that the flu season's almost 9 months long. A majority of the illnesses occur over about a 6-month time frame, from about October to March. So 2015 to 2016, there were an estimated 24 million flu cases in the United States, 23,000 estimated number of deaths. So that gives us a death rate of 0.1% for that flu season. The 2016-2017 flu season, an estimated 29 million cases of the flu, 36,000 deaths for a death rate of 0.13%. The 2017-2018 flu season, that was a bad one. Estimated 45 million cases of the flu, an estimated 61,000 deaths, also for a death rate of 0.13%. Just for perspective, the Spanish flu, 675,000 deaths in the United States over an 18-month to 2-year period. The COVID-19 death rate, we still don't know. We won't know until we have months and months of data to really gather that, but we're getting our first glimpse of what the true death rate might actually be. So I'm going to be erasing this here, and we're going to be putting this calculation in a few minutes, so stay with us. So we're going to go to incubation period. The incubation period is the time it takes from when the virus gets into your body before you start to show symptoms. So for the flu, you get infected with the flu virus. It takes anywhere from 2 to 5 days to start to feel the flu effects. For coronavirus, for COVID-19, it's anywhere from 2 to 14 days from when you get infected with COVID-19 virus before you start to manifest symptoms. So this is quite variable in the timeline of incubation. This is a longer illness, and we can see this demonstrated here in the next section. What's it like to actually have the flu versus COVID? Well, we already know, most of us know, probably all of us know. Just about all of us have had the flu at least once in our life. The flu lasts somewhere between 5 and 7 days. And some cases are mild. You've heard people say, yeah, it was just a mild flu. Other people say, I had a terrible flu. I was in bed for a week. It was awful, high fevers, whatever. So you get some sense of what it is to sort of have the flu because we kind of already know. For COVID-19, much different. Highly variable for COVID-19. It can last anywhere from 1 to 3+ weeks. I have a patient who is 5 weeks out from exposure and still having some symptoms. So it can last a very long time. It can last a very short time. Up to 50% of people that are infected with COVID have no symptoms whatsoever. I don't even know if we have data on whether or not there's an asymptomatic flu. Usually when you catch the flu, you sort of know you have the flu to one degree or another. In this case, half of people may not even know. The symptomatology for COVID-19 is also very different from the flu. The flu is pretty classic. You get the fatigue, body aches and pains, the fevers, headaches, muscle stiffness, things like that. For COVID-19, it could be anywhere from pink eye to just GI symptoms to severe respiratory symptoms, just a headache, just fevers, or some mix of all of it, and it can come in stages. You could start with the GI stuff, then a few days later that could go away, then it could go to headaches, and a few days after that it could go to respiratory, then you could get better, then you can get worse again. It's all over the place. So this is a highly variable, protracted, long-lasting illness in people. In the people that I've spoken with that have had COVID, and they explain to me the difference between having COVID and having the flu, they say, yeah, it's like having a really bad flu that lasts way longer than a regular flu might last. So that's some sense of what it's like to have COVID versus the flu. Let's go to the next section. All right, I'm gonna get down a little bit here so we can see the next thing on the board here. So this is called R0, or this is the basic reproduction number. In other words, this is how easily it spreads. So for the flu, the R0 is somewhere between 1 and 2. So what this means is if you have the flu, then you're likely to spread your flu to 1 to 2 people on average. The Spanish flu had an R0 of 1.4 to 2.8. So one person that had Spanish flu is likely to spread it to somewhere between 1 to 2.8 people, 1 to 3 people basically. The 2009 flu had an R0 of 1.4 to 1.6. So that means that every one person that had the 2009 flu was going to spread that to another 1.5 people basically. So that's the average. The COVID-19 R0, or the basic reproduction number, is somewhere between 2 and 4, with the estimate range of 1.5 up to 5.7. In New York, the current calculation is an R0 of somewhere between 3.3 and 3.4. So that means every one person that has COVID-19 is likely to spread it to somewhere between 2 and 4 people. So you can see easily at a glance, COVID-19 spreads more easily than the flu does. So more people are likely to get infected. A couple of notes here about this. If you live in rural America and your closest neighbor is a mile away from you, then your R0 for your community is likely to be much lower. If you live in New York City, where you share a studio apartment with 10 roommates, and you give all 10 of your roommates COVID-19, then your R0 is at 10. So the more tightly packed a community is, the higher the number is going to be. That's why we see the outbreaks and the kind of the greater spread and higher numbers in places like New York City, because people are so congested in those areas. So, but the average is somewhere between 2 and 4 that you're going to spread. So we know it spreads more easily. Let's go down to this last line here, because this is another important kind of a distinguishing factor between the COVID-19 and flu. So how do we control the flu? Well, we've been dealing with the flu for hundreds and hundreds of years, we kind of know, but we have flu shots. We have a vaccine, basically, and we do a good job with the flu shot some years. Other years, the flu shot isn't very good, but we have something to give people immunity. There's lots of different flu strains, and so sometimes we don't get that flu shot right, but it certainly lowers the likelihood that you'll get the flu. Or another way we do it is we just have strong, healthy immune systems. There's lots of people that never get a flu shot, and they never get the flu. So there's something about them, something about their immune system that makes them less likely to get the flu. Awesome. How do we control COVID-19? Well, we've only been dealing with this for 8-10 weeks now, so we really don't have a good way to control it yet. We have no vaccine. There's no good treatment. So the only choice we have is to close everything. We have to close everything. Even in closing everything, we still have 65,000 deaths in 8 weeks. It took us closing everything just to keep the number where it is. Had we not closed everything, that number would be significantly higher, no question about it. Okay, and so that's just a rough breakdown. Remember, I'm going to get to this death rate number for COVID in here in just a few minutes, but let's go and look at another thing. This is very interesting here. So I'm just going to look at a glance. This is the leading causes of death in the United States of America. We've all known for a long time heart disease is the leading killer of Americans. About 650,000 people per year die from heart disease. That averages out to around 1,800 people per day are dying from heart disease. Cancer, the second leading cause of death in the United States. About 600,000 people per year die from cancer. Comes out to a little over 1,600 deaths per day because of cancer. Third leading cause of death in the United States is estimated to be medical errors. That could be anything from problems with medications to problems when you're hospitalized, operating on the wrong body part, whatever the reason that it might be that someone dies from medical errors. About 250,000 people in the United States die every year related to this, or about 685 people per day. Accidents, number 4, 170,000 people die per year from accidents, or around 465 people per day on average. The flu lasting at around 6 months for a bulk of the deaths, and we already say 60,000 is a relatively high number for the flu. There are flu seasons where only 20,000 people die, 30,000 people die, but let's say 60,000 and choose the high number that comes from the CDC. So 60,000 people over a 6-month time frame is 328 people per day die from the flu during a bad flu season. COVID-19 so far, particularly over these last few weeks, we've seen what everybody has seen what the numbers are doing. Somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 people per day are dying from COVID-19. That outpaces every other cause of death in the United States. And remember, we had to close the country down just to keep it at 2,000 to 2,500 people per day dying of COVID. Significantly different than the flu at 328 people per day. Even a bad flu season at 60,000 people dead during a 6-month time frame. And we don't have to close anything to keep that number like that. All right, so now let's get to kind of the most important number. There's a lot of speculation about what the death rate might actually be, but I want to make a distinguishing factor here. All right, so I'm going to get down here really low so you can see. Hopefully, is that okay? Yes. That's good where I'm at? All right, so here we are, and I want to make a distinguishing factor. It's really important. This is the COVID-19 death rate. Now, I'm going to give you a rough calculation, but first, I need to kind of explain the difference between the case fatality rate versus the overall mortality rate or death rate. So the numbers that you might see in mainstream media, you could see any kind of numbers in terms of the high range, 5.9% of people dying. What we're really seeing here is that the case fatality rate is just how many people that are confirmed positive cases. So they've had a nasal swab, we know they have coronavirus, and then how many of those people have died. So there's a little over 1 million confirmed cases, a little over 1 million people have been swabbed, confirmed positive. So far on this calculation, 63,000 deaths. That number's a little bit higher now, but close enough for our estimate. So around 5.9% of people that have been swabbed and confirmed positive end up dying from COVID. That's in the United States. Just as a comparison, Italy, they have 205,000 confirmed cases. They've been swabbed. We know they have it. 28,000 deaths. That gives us a 13.6% death rate in Italy. That's a case fatality rate. Sweden, another example. 21,000 cases, 2,500 deaths for a case fatality rate of 12.3%. 12.3% of people that are confirmed positive COVID end up dying from COVID. That is very much different from what the overall death rate, like we talked about for the flu, where the confirmed death rate for the flu is around 0.1%, 0.13%. We showed that before. So how do we estimate what is the death rate, the overall mortality rate for COVID-19? Well, we won't know that until we have the true full numbers of how many people actually had COVID in the United States. But we do have a glimpse of what that number could be. So I have to stress this last little bit that I'm going to explain. This is a rough estimate. We do not have near enough data to say that this is definitely what it's going to be, but I'm going to give you an example. This would be the best death rate that I've ever seen. So let me explain how we got to this number. All right, I pulled up my chair here. This is an important little section here. I really want to explain this well. So how are we going to ascertain what the overall mortality rate or overall death rate for COVID-19? Well, I'm going to use Queens, New York as an example. Why Queens, New York? Because up in New York City, New York State, they did random antibody testing on lots of people. People walking around on the street, they just grabbed people and said, hey, can we do an antibody test on you? See if you've had COVID before. Well, it turns out in that little study that they did, 25% of people in New York City tested positive for COVID, which would suggest that 25% of people in New York City have already had COVID-19. Well, the population of Queens, New York is 2.3 million. So if 25% of people in Queens, New York have already had COVID, 25% of 2.3 million people is 575,000 people in Queens have already had COVID. Well, this 575,000 number is much higher than the 109,000 confirmed positives. These confirmed positives, 109,000, were with the nasal swab. We know that they have it. Versus the estimate of this 575,000 people were never swabbed, but they have it. So 575,000 people have already had it, 3,581 deaths as of a few days ago. 3,581 divided by 575,000 total people that may have had COVID gives us an overall death rate of 0.62% in New York City. And again, if we assume that all this is true, big assumptions are made here, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, so we can do a calculation, 25% of New York City really did have COVID at some point over the last 90 days or so. So now we can use this 0.62% overall mortality rate and carry that all the way up here. Again, many assumptions that we're talking about here, but let's go ahead and use this 0.62, which is significantly lower than any death rate that you'll see reported anywhere else. So let's use maybe an artificially low number, but let's use it anyway, just for the sake of argument. So let's go back up here. All right, reset. Okay, so if I take this 0.62% estimated death rate that we have, I'm going to now put that in here. Again, a lot of assumptions are made about this death rate, but let's just say that it is. Here's one thing that I'm assuming, kind of to extrapolate. 0.62%, that might be the death rate for just Queens, New York. That might not be the death rate for the whole country. The death rate for the whole country might end up being higher, might end up being lower. We just don't know. But that's why I'm saying this is just a glimpse, and so let's use this and let's just assume that that's what it's going to be for the whole country. Again, 0.62 is an extremely low death rate, much lower than what's estimated so far. 0.62%. Now remember the death rates for the flu, 0.1, 0.13, so this is a significantly higher death rate. So what's this mean? So let's say, just like in New York City, that 25% of America were to get COVID. And if the death rate holds like it is in New York City, 25% of the United States is a population of 82,500,000 people. And then if 0.62% of people that actually have COVID end up dying from COVID, like the data from New York suggests, then that means that there would be 511,000 deaths at a 0.62 death rate. 511,000 deaths from COVID if 25% of America were to catch COVID. That's a pretty big number. Let's say we need to achieve herd immunity, like I've heard some doctors sort of say, we just need to let everybody catch COVID and get herd immunity. Well, let's use our extremely low estimate of a death rate, 0.62%. In order to achieve herd immunity, around 85% of people need to catch COVID. Now, normally the best way to achieve herd immunity would be with vaccines, but we don't have a vaccine for COVID, so the only way to achieve herd immunity would be to just let everybody go out and infect each other. So what if we did that? We would need around 85%, roughly, rough estimate, needs to be infected to achieve herd immunity. 85% of the population of America is 280 million people, roughly. Oops. So if 280 million people in the United States were infected with this to achieve herd immunity at a 0.62 death rate, again, then that means that we would have to sacrifice 1.7 million American lives to achieve 85% infection rate, which would give us herd immunity. I don't think that that's acceptable. I don't think that any reasonable person would think that that's an acceptable number of deaths to achieve herd immunity. The economy is absolutely a significant concern for all of us, but is this number worth the trade-off of economy? That's for you to decide. That's not for me to decide. So here's just your breakdown. These are just the facts. I'm just going to step back from this board so we can see everything that we have here. 65,000 people have already died in 8 weeks. 20 to 60,000 people die from the flu over 6 months. Having COVID is way more miserable to have COVID than the flu on average for people that get it badly. Spreads much more easily. It's now the leading cause of death in the United States per day. And even if we have a very low 0.62 overall death rate, that's still 500,000, a million and a half people that would die if we didn't close everything the way that we did. So hopefully this will help you to see these are the facts, these are the numbers, basic calculation, it's all laid out. So for anybody that has any questions for or against any of this, here's your numbers. You can go look it all up. I'm signing out. That's it.